Yeah, it's been quite a packed couple of weeks actually. I'm still slightly jet lagged from being in America a couple of weeks ago,
Oh,
but I was saying this earlier to someone, and actually, it's probably not a good excuse anymore.
how
Yeah.
come you were in the US?
Um, it is actually related to Aussie. It's something we're talking about. So we went to a startup conference in San Francisco, and it's really nice to get outside of the UK. And there's a real optimism as well. You know, often in the UK, it's great, but you'll say, "Hey, I want to build this thing. Like this is what I want to do," and often they're like, "Okay, that's a bit ambitious." And then in America, it's like, oh, I want to move to Mars. And everyone's like, yeah, that's great. Just,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah, well,
yeah,
I mean, you
exactly.
already started talking about it, but do you pronounce it Aussie? Aussie?
So the funny thing is, like, I'm still figuring out how to pronounce it because it's Romanian for to hear. So Daniela, co-founder and partner, she's Romanian. So that's where it came from. So I think she told me the correct pronunciation, which is like very different from what I said. But, um, so I think maybe Aussie, maybe. So this has been the sort of thing that has been an idea for quite some time. Essentially, where it came from was so I've always worn a hearing aid ever since I was very, very young, so maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I've always felt that there's a bit of a stigma still to wearing hearing aids specifically, which is not the same for glasses, for instance. Recently, I've seen so many cool like Burberry and fashionable adverts for glasses, and it's funny like I'd always think like I could never imagine that for hearing aids, and why is that the case? You know, it's more of a curiosity thing.
Mm.
And Daniela comes from the world of jewelry, so she's got over 10 years experience of making jewelry, of designing jewelry. She's also like a gemstone expert, which she really understands that world. But essentially, it was a natural combination of our background. So I guess for me, it's the journey of wearing a hearing aid, of being a user, and really wanting something that I would use myself. Uh, then obviously with Daniela, really having her expertise on what looks good and then what's possible. So that was it really. So I think for us, a lot of it was that question of why can't hearing aids be as fashionable or unique as any piece of jewelry?
Yeah, no, it's cool. I actually read about you. I think it was like a post on the LinkedIn page or something, also talking about like why glasses and why not hearing aids. People wear glasses for fashion when they see fine. I guess with hearing aids, it's still a bit more like, oh, what is that? You know, what are those? Do you remember when you were growing up? Like, I guess you said you had them from a really young age. Do you remember your first hearing aids?
I remember some of the first ones for sure. So actually, this is funny. It's like a deconstructed one. So
Right.
the NHS is going to hate me for showing this, but so that's the size of them at the moment. They they used to be really big, so I
Mm.
think they were called analog hearing aids. So they're like massive, like really like chunky things, and like the tubes are super thick. And it is funny actually because this would have been maybe 20 years ago or so, and even then they were thinking about, especially for kids, the fact that it's something you'd be self-conscious about. So like they actually had, and I really appreciate them trying this. Like it used to be the case that you had like a big mold, which was
Mm.
the shape of the entire like inside of your ear, and then the actual top bit was quite big as well. And I do remember you could like get like an image put onto the main mold in the middle,
I
so you could have
see.
like Mario or like Harry Potter or stuff like that, which is nice. And I know that feeds into what we're speaking about today, but yeah, I always felt that they looked very medical and very noticeable, and people maybe didn't, especially younger kids as well, realize maybe what they were initially. Because I think with glasses, obviously they're much more accepted and normal, and even for young children. My older brother is the same as me, so we've both been through the exact same journey, both moderate hearing loss in both ears, etc. From a very early age. So that was nice to both had that experience. But I think I'm still, although these days I'm much more comfortable with it, and I know it's a part of my identity and everything, which is much more positive. But even now, I'm still only wear one when I'm meant to wear two, and I think that feeds back into the kind of stigma a bit. And I do think if we can make them, look fashionable and appealing, and even change the name type of thing, I think for me it would certainly help, and hopefully for other people too, it would help them.
I find it so interesting now to think of like what you would do for children versus what you would do for adults, because I guess your
Yeah,
company caters more towards adults and maybe even luxury goods to some extent. Like it's jewelry, it's got like bling on it. It's
yeah,
is it for everyone? Like what's your target audience?
yeah. I've been thinking a lot about it. Like, yeah, I was speaking to Danielle about it as well, and we've done a lot of community work the last maybe 6 years or so. And one thing that comes up so often, which I can see happens all the time, and I'm really trying to wrestle against it, which is the temptation to think that it's for everyone. Actually, loads of people need to wear hearing aids. This is actually an incredible amount of people, and one thing I'd love to speak about is the gap between people who need hearing aids and the people who wear them. So there's a lot of
Mm,
people who don't wear them that need them, which we'll come back to. But I think for us, for Danero and I think it's most sensible to focus on maybe young professionals. So people
mm,
maybe at our age at the moment, because I think we probably have a better understanding of like messaging and even reaching people. I
mm,
guess we're maybe tuned into what people our age are using. Because I've had some really good feedback from people who are maybe a few generations older, and I think for a few of them, the fashion elements may be less important, and actually a lot of it is much more on the functionality and can it adapt to like noisy environments and change automatically and these things, which something else I'm really curious about as well, because mine certainly are super rigid in terms of adapting to noise, which
mm.
obviously is a huge part of the experience. And then, yeah, come back to your point about the children piece. Danielle and I can really figure out young professionals and really, I guess, validate how we're thinking about it. And I think for children would be nice as well, because I know certainly for me that growing up with hearing aids was a big part of my experience as a kid and teenager, etc. And I think anything we can do to really help people feel more like accepted and even cool as
Mm.
a kid is would be welcome. So yeah, very long way of answering it, but
No,
hopefully
it's
that makes
interesting.
sense.
I was also wondering, I guess, do you consider yourself a little bit of an activist in this community? Because it's kind of a shift in mindset, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd certainly like to be. I guess we're quite early, but yeah, really, because I think whenever I've been speaking to people about it as well, and the reason it's so fascinating is like the technology's there, like people can use hearing aids and they hear better. To
Mm,
me, it feels like much more of a almost like a branding and what's the words? Like a branding and messaging thing. And yeah, that's why I'm really
mm,
curious about really having a movement that says, well, why can't hearing aids be cool? Like, what is stopping us from even changing the name, having them starting with fashion first and then having this tech built into that. I really want to position Aussie as a fashion tech company.
mm,
I know there's a huge movement around disability tech, which is amazing, and I'm super on board with it. But I think, I don't know, I would love for Aussie to be thought of in a similar way to the fashion brands out there. So, you've got obviously the likes of Gucci and all
yeah.
the really high end and desirable products, because for me, that's part of the movement. I think if we are to move towards hearing aids being thought of in the same way as glasses, there's maybe an element of being slightly disruptive and kind of maybe slightly edgy in some of the ways we
Yeah.
think about it. So yeah, absolutely. I think I'd welcome as many people and as much energy and resources behind fixing the problem. So many people need hearing aids that don't wear
Mm,
them at the moment. I've certainly been very lucky to wear hearing aids and not feel as isolated as some people do, because I know that for people who understandably are reluctant to wear them and it's a big barrier, like it's everything, it's your personal relationships, it's your career and your work, it's your ability to really connect with people. If you can't
Hmm.
hear properly, I mean that is, such a detriment to your experience. So yeah.
What would you call them instead? Like not hearing aids, because aids implies, there's some disability
Yeah,
form like terminology in there. So what else?
yeah, I had a few thoughts on it, and again, everything here we're really keen to validate with people, even something like audio jewelry, because then it's like, yeah, wait, this is a fashion accessory that's desirable, and actually, by the way, it also helps with hearing.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, we'd make sure we're reaching people who need help with hearing. So that's one that's come to mind, which the more I say it, I think fits. It's really funny, like even if you look at headphones,
Hmm.
people are often not only obviously okay wearing headphones, but actually will often wear them as a kind of status thing. Like if
Yeah.
you look at AirPods, for
Yeah.
instance, personally, I don't think they look that cool, but it's Apple, and then people are like, yeah, I've got AirPods, and everyone wears them on the tube in London and stuff. If there was a parallel universe where glasses were called sight aids, I think there may be
Mm.
like a similar thing with hearing aids. And it's funny, isn't it? Because the word glasses is quite neutral, but also it's very like it can be lifestyle. I mean, you have sunglasses, and you think of
Yeah.
cool Ray-Bans, and even now you've got like the Meta AI glasses with cameras and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, maybe something along those lines could be interesting.
People who might not have hearing loss might actually get interested in wearing this kind of stuff if you brand it in a certain way, right? It's kind of, how would you feel if that happened? Like if people just started having hearing jewelry.
Yeah, it's a really good point actually. I think I'd certainly welcome it. I think as long as people who need them obviously have the opportunity, and there's like not too much scarcity or anything, and things are sold out everywhere. But assuming that's not the case, maybe a positive thing, because actually, you, I know I speak so much about glasses, but I certainly had friends in school who would wear glasses like without lenses and stuff, because they were cool, and maybe that was a similar thing. And I guess with hearing, similar to vision, like it is a spectrum for everyone, like
Mm-hmm.
it's certainly not a binary thing. And you kind of have to wonder like how many people maybe are losing small bits of hearing. Not to like scare anyone obviously with this, but you have
Yeah.
people who there's a big thing around listening to loud music for a long period of
Mm.
time, especially concerts, and even you get warnings on your phone now where it's too high volume and stuff.
Yeah.
And even such a random example, but like if you're on the tube in London, it can be super noisy in some of these carriages and things like that. And you kind of have to wonder like how many people are going around with maybe 90% of hearing or even 80, and it's
Yeah.
not enough that you really notice. But let's say, I think everyone struggles, when it's really noisy in like a bar, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, so much background noise is picked up. Ironically, so I take my hearing aid out when I'm in bars and restaurants because otherwise it just, it really is too much noise. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm very lucky actually because, I mean, the way my hearing is, I probably have a slight advantage because everyone speaks louder naturally,
Mm.
but I don't have as much of the background noise as, people with full hearing have. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a very random
Interesting.
example, but no, I'm really welcoming it because I think anything that really helps to move away from that feeling of it's almost a binary thing at the moment where it's like you either wear hearing aids or you don't, so it's either you're normal or different.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like with glasses, um, it's much more fluid, I guess.
Actually, thinking about sunglasses, I mean, they have kind of a protective factor to them, right? So if you speak about noise
Yeah,
exposure being an issue, now we've got noise cancelling. So if it's going to be a spectrum, it might go both in the enhancing and amplification direction and in the cancelling direction, that it's like more of an augmentation of reality, almost like on a spectrum,
yeah,
fully
mm,
from I pick what I want to hear to, and then all of that looking cool is a plus.
Because I'm actually in a really nice like WhatsApp community of other people who have hearing loss and wear hearing aids, and actually for a lot of them, this is one of the big things that comes up, which is how open do you want to be with people in terms of your hearing needs? Because again, I
Mm,
think again going back to that thing around like stigma and maybe not wanting it to be too obvious, that is there. But
yeah,
also like especially if you're in work or important conversations, you may need to be upfront and say, hey, like I need to be able to read your lips, for instance, because
yeah.
that really helps with hearing. If I need captions to be able to read just so I don't miss anything. And I think I know this is more of an indirect way of thinking about the stigma and everything, but I mean that's why I'd love to really do work and then contribute to just making it more accepted. And I think hopefully if we had this movement of people wearing maybe it is audio jewelry as a name, it's kind of like yeah, like everyone's somewhere on this spectrum of hearing. It's like yeah, well actually for me like my hearing's a bit worse, so like if you can yeah speak slightly louder that would really help. So
Do you see this going like, okay, dreaming a little bit, but maybe also as a vision? If
of
you're
course
going to design these perfect, like the hearing jewelry that you want, and it has also not just the aesthetic side, but also internally the functional side. And like, I don't know if you like science fiction, but
yeah yeah
going a bit
of
into that
course.
direction of maybe adding abilities rather than talking about it in a disability terms of going back to what's normal, but actually going beyond it. Like, do you have any wishes or visions or ideas for that?
Mm, yeah, I like it. I like it. I think one of the biggest things is, and I think you touched on it with like the noise cancellation. I know there's quite a few really good companies like Loop who do great things there, and they've got the really cool looking what do you call them, like
I've got
earbuds
them,
to
I
stop
think.
noise.
Like the,
Oh, nice.
I don't know,
Oh,
I can't
amazing.
see them right now, but I've got them for concerts.
We know a few people wear them, and what gives me optimism is I think for them they're trying to maybe do similar um with earbuds, like make them more cool and usable and like design them well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so to your point, I mean, there's certain things that ironically when you have hearing loss are easier. So I guess like the bar example. So yeah, let's
Mm-hmm.
say people wear them and then there's a way for the device to automatically reduce the background noise, but also amplify voices, especially if
Mm-hmm.
you're like speaking to people in a circle or at a table. Um, Slightly silly and funny examples might be, snoring, for instance. Like I was showing with Daniela recently that like I'll sleep through basically everything, like anything really, because I don't really hear it. But for her, like if anyone's snoring in a hotel, in the next room, it's keeps her up at night quite a lot. Even the old joke around upstairs neighbors being super loud, like
True.
jumping around and on the ceiling and stuff. That as well can be interesting. So yeah, so absolutely. So that kind of like adaptive environments thing I think can be really interesting. And yeah, you're right, like it really flips it on its head and says, well, look, this is actually additive to the normal hearing experience,
Yeah.
and it's not just about helping people hear better, it's about other benefits.
You mentioned earlier that you have a nice group chat with kind of people in the community. How is the deaf community in the wider sense in Scotland, actually?
I think like up until Aussie, I've never really like looked for it much in terms of like actually looking for kind of other people who wear hearing aids. But I think it's really supportive. It's a great space just to vent and say, hey, I was struggling with this is really difficult, or, this happened at work and I couldn't hear and this is why it's
Mm,
frustrating. And I think because it's really specific to people who are on that same journey, it can be really quite meaningful because it's like, actually, I do get it, like I've been there and hey, here's another example and here's what I did. And even just as simple as saying, yeah, happened to me as well, that solidarity thing. And then I think as well for me in particular, like it's been a great way to really listen and understand how others relate to it.
You said you were in the US recently. I don't know how much you got from the US side in terms of hearing aids or hearing loss or
Mm.
deafness. Do you feel like there's a difference in the vibe around the topic? Apart from startups being generally more optimistic, maybe.
Like in my head, I would have said that in America people are more like open and will speak about it, and there's like less stigma. And actually, I think it's really similar. Like I think in the
Mm.
US, it's as high as 80% of people who need hearing aids don't wear them, which to me was crazy. I was like, are you sure it's not the other way around? Like, are you
Yeah.
sure it's not 20? But it really was, and to me that's so interesting. Where like you have to wonder if the same type of stigma is there, even though the cultures are very different. Like my guess would be people in the US may be more early adopters overall, in terms of there might be more people willing to try something new initially, but that could be complete nonsense maybe once we
Mm.
try it. The one thing that's really interesting in the US is hearing aids you can get over the counter. I think that was quite a recent
Okay.
thing. One thing I'm a bit nervous about is in the UK, it's still a medical device, I think.
Yeah.
So I think there's quite a lot of protocols to go through in terms of, because for Janelle and I, like we'd love to design a device from the beginning, like long
Mm.
term. There's only so much you can do with a cover. It's like a phone case at the moment, which is fine and it looks nice, but it's still quite limiting. The way that the US is set up, it may be it may be easier to do that. But again, these are kind of long term thoughts, and selfishly being Scottish and from the UK, I would love to make sure that people here and obviously across Europe and across the world get a chance to benefit, and it's not just America.
I think that's a valid concern. I mean, if you want to go away from this medicalized view, you still have to get them prescribed through a doctor. And then maybe there's also an insurance thing where it's like, oh, you want the cool ones or the basic ones. And then you have this divide, I guess, like there's this whole bigger story around making these kinds of changes that
Mm,
I can see how
yeah,
this is all going into your thoughts with this. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's funny actually because I think even though I've born here in this for so long, like I never really looked into a lot of like how they're made because so like on the NHS for instance, obviously we're very lucky to get them, absolutely. But like I did ask actually my local audiology team about new hearing aids this week, and they said that it will be like 12 to 18 months waiting list, which is pretty crazy. I
Oh.
mean, mine are pretty bashed up. I mean, this one is missing tubes,
Yeah.
which I will add on again, but it's a bit old. I know it's like blurry, but um, and then to buy hearing aids is like thousands of pounds, and I'm
Oh.
like the newest iPhone would be what, maybe £1,000 or slightly more. You've got like iPhone watches that are like £500 maybe. Even the well-made headphones can be a couple hundred. But for hearing
Mm.
aids, like you're talking into the thousands, and for me, I'm like, that's crazy. Like surely, you know, the technology to help someone hear better. I know it's complicated. I know it's not easy, but not only do we want to challenge the way they're made and the fashion and the perception, but surely there's a way to maybe make it more accessible for people to get them. Because I can imagine in the UK, and I know it's not the same for every location and every person, but imagine having to wait like a year or longer for hearing aids.
Yeah.
Or the option is just buy them and spend thousands of pounds. It's crazy. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing to look into as well. Like how does the cost even come up, right?
I'm really curious as well because I mean they say that a lot when it comes to like drug production. Like a lot of people get scrutiny, especially in America, like why do these drugs cost so much? But like
Yeah.
you go back and it's like 20 years of R&D and it kind of makes sense. But there's often a big story of just like the traditional industries and companies who have been around for years, and like they're just
Mm.
the accepted providers. You'll have like the big incumbent companies who have been around for
Mm.
years, and like they just have the market, and they're slow to adopt new technology. Like the previous company I was with is in health tech, and there's a really big example there in the NHS, for instance, where they don't have great feedback from customers. They charge an unbelievable amount of money. The technology isn't great. I'm not saying it's the same for hearing, obviously, but that's something that I'm wondering if it is the case. And then I don't want this to be like too much of like you can have those slightly romantic stories about startups.
Right.
It's like, yeah, we're gonna take on big industry, and yeah, we're the small people, and but I don't know if it is the case for us. It's always about um, other people's hearing experiences. Like that is, you know, that's the reason we've started Aussie. Like, could we could we have a world where hearing aids like completely change? Like, it's a new name, maybe it's audio jewelry, they look cool,
Mm.
uh, the tech is really up to date and constantly being changed and improved, and actually the cost is super reasonable.
Have you seen any other companies that are trying to do something similar?
Yeah, we've seen a couple actually. So there's one called Deaf Metal, which is cool. Like I really like
I've
their
heard of
name.
them. I think are they Swedish
Yeah.
or something?
So I mean, the way they've approached it is like normal jewelry pieces that you attach to hearing aids,
Right.
which is cool. So you might have like an earring that's got like a hook on it
Right.
that attaches to an existing hearing aid, which is great. And I love how they're thinking about it. And there's another company whose name I've totally forgotten now. I think for them though, like they're maybe thinking of it more from the perspective of could hearing aids be like more techy? So could they look
Mm.
more like AirPods? So again, super on board with
Mm.
that. It's great to have other people in the space trying to do a similar thing. I think it really, yeah, I guess it shows that other people have had this on their minds, and maybe it is a big enough problem to pursue. It's such a big potential number of people who might need it that there's space for so many people.
Great. If someone would be really enthusiastic about, I don't know, getting in touch or in some way interested in contacting you, how can they find you? Is it LinkedIn or?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. Or old website's good as well. So it's just
Mhm.
aussie.me. So super short. We've just put a form on at the moment. We've just called it waiting list just to kind
Mhm.
of, I guess, gather interest, and you can add your, email and phone, etc. And we'll just get in touch with people. We'd love just to hear about your journey. We really want to hear what you've gone through and what hearing aids you're using, and what the gaps you feel are. And then
Mhm.
for us, obviously, Danielle and I will work backwards and say, yeah, this makes sense. So, yeah, so website's great, LinkedIn's great as well. And yeah, just really keen to meet more fellow hearing aid wearers and
Sounds
continue
cool.
the mission.